This big weather pattern change signal has continued to grow on the models, and it looks like it's coming in about a week or so with a big storm that could even have some wintry aspects to it at that same time. This video has all the details you need to know on that big change, as the jet stream will go crazy, plus I'll even include some details on a possible tropical storm for Florida.
One Nation weather.
Thank you very much for taking time out of the middle of your week to join me in this video. I hope everybody is doing well out there. Just a very quick reminder before I get into it that the awesome weather model maps I use in my videos are from Weatherbell, so if you want to check them out, there's a free trial link to that right down below in the description. Also, right down below this video here on YouTube is that subscribe button. If you enjoy the rest of this video and you are new to the channel, I'd love it if you'd subscribe so that you catch all the latest updates from me in the future. But let's get right into it using the future radar from the model that has been doing the best on this pattern change. And that is the GFS model. I'm going to be using its midday run from today on our Tuesday here to time out the next 10 days of weather, and that all starts out with some near-term activity riding right through the middle of our mild weather pattern continuing across the U.S. This quick storm is going to be stretching into our Wednesday afternoon, really anywhere from Minnesota all the way down the Mississippi Valley towards places like Louisiana and Mississippi, with points in between also being impacted. Just looks like a generally rainy day into our Wednesday with some showers and storms. This is not related to our pattern change, and overall the chance for severe weather will be very low, and it's going to be very close to zero unless you're down there towards places like Louisiana, Arkansas, and Mississippi. This is more of just a quick mid to late week nuisance storm. As you can see, it's going to be pushing east at a pretty quick rate, so the Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, and then down to the southeast U.S. A lot of impacts going overnight Wednesday night and into our Thursday, with some generally moderate rain across a lot of these zones. No extremely heavy downpours, and no really intense thunderstorms expected out of this storm by any stretch. And then as we go to the end of our Thursday, you can see as we go towards 7, 8, 9, 10 in the evening, most of the energy with this storm beginning to break up, but we'll still have a good chance for some rain towards the Carolina coast, the Virginia coast. Really, it's just going to be those mid-Atlantic spots that feel the last impacts out of the rain from this storm. And notice it's just all rain, even up in some of the higher elevations there, places like West Virginia, Pennsylvania. We're going to have a hard time seeing any sort of sleet or freezing precipitation out of this, although I wouldn't fully rule that out. Behind that storm, we go through Friday. Here we are pausing it on our Saturday, November 16th. You can see pretty much dry across a lot of the country, and we are sticking with the temperature setup that we have been generally seeing for weeks now in the U.S. Warmer than average for most areas, meaning a mild fall continues, but things will be able to change as we get behind this next storm and the trough of cool air that's going to try and dig in behind it. Here comes this storm. It is looking a lot more certain than when I talked about it a couple days ago in my last video. The models are all agreeing that by the time we go towards around the Monday, November 18th timeframe in the middle of the day, we're going to see really the one and only big storm that looks like it's going to form as we go towards next week, getting going into the central parts of the country. Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, a chance for some showers and maybe even some thunderstorms that could be on that stronger side. Gusty winds, all of those kinds of impacts certainly possible with a strong low pressure system like this. Notice the timing. That looks like it's going to be around Monday. Then as we go out of Monday the 18th into our Tuesday the 19th, the models have this system pivoting northward. We could maybe see some snow in parts of North Dakota and Minnesota with this storm, but it looks like most parts of the Midwest will just be seeing rain at least through the time frame of Tuesday. Everything with this storm beyond this point, though, is really going to depend on what is going on with those arrows coming in from the west-northwest that I drew, coming out of Idaho and Montana, making their way down to the southeast. That is where your actual trough of cool air is going to be cutting in, and the faster that interacts with this storm, the faster snowfall will set in parts of the Midwest if we have enough moisture still in place. As you can see, the GFS model is definitely pretty bullish on the setup and agrees that we're going to have enough low pressure still around the Midwest with rain in parts of Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, surrounding spots. Once that cool air reaches this low, which with the low lollygagging into Wednesday, that would certainly be possible, we could definitely see a band of heavier snowfall. I don't want to point out that it's just in Iowa and Missouri like this model shows, but somewhere on that northwest side, just look for the trends when you're this far out, somewhere on that northwest side, the GFS model is saying, okay, the cool air is going to catch up to this low, and we are going to see some snow be able to pivot in with that cool down. That being said, anywhere up here in the central plains and the north central plains into the upper Midwest, it certainly looks like as we go to the early to mid to even maybe the back half of next week, somewhere in that time frame, depending on when the cool air catches up to the low, if it is still around, we could see some snow catch up. And let me explain why that is a possibility and not a full guarantee here using the atmosphere. I love to look up into the atmosphere about 15 to 20,000 feet, and that's exactly what I'm going to do here. Starting with the European model, then we'll pivot back over to the GFS and what they show with these upper level scenarios. Oranges and reds on these maps indicate ridging and warmer air. the jet stream being pushed north in that case. Meanwhile, the jet stream being pushed south indicates a trough, and that is where those blue colors are on your screen. You can clearly see a couple of troughs exiting the western U.S. Let's go ahead and begin to zoom in on the first one. You can see it right down there towards Texas and Oklahoma. That is where our low pressure system with all the rain is going to be before it pivots northward going out of Monday and into Tuesday. Meanwhile, back behind it and kind of separated from it and the ridge, we just have this other area of troughing in the jet stream, some strong troughing at that. Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, this is where that cool down is already going to begin to kind of surge on through, and the faster it can catch up to that low that's down to its southeast, the better chance we have of it interacting with the moisture from that low somewhere near the northern plains or the Midwest, and the better chance we would have of snow behind the storm in addition to the cool down that I discussed in the last video and I am about to discuss in more detail again here in this video. The European model, it is going to be a little bit lousy in terms of its setup if you are a snow lover, because it shows that initial low kind of running ahead here, right where the blue meets the orange shade there in Illinois going towards Indiana. That's your original low. The cool down is that deeper blue shade you can see back there, still struggling to catch up into our Tuesday. It's back towards the Dakotas and Nebraska, and as long as the low stays ahead of the cool down like this, we would have a pretty low chance of any sort of, especially significant accumulating snow totals towards, Iowa, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Minnesota, you name it. But that is just one of the atmospheric scenarios. We've already seen the other scenario in terms of at the surface using the GFS model, but let me just show you what that actually looks like in the atmosphere so that you can understand why the GFS actually showed more snow pivoting around our storm. Notice the initial setup's the same as we go towards Monday. Strong storm down here pivoting into Texas and Oklahoma, banking up against our ridge. Meanwhile, the cool down lingers behind it. However, the initial storm gets thrown up here towards the upper Midwest and actually begins falling apart. Because it's falling apart, it slows down a bit more, and that cool down that's coming in from the west that you can see sinking down into the Rockies around Tuesday afternoon, it will actually have time to catch up. This is where you see the difference in our scenarios between that Euro model and the GFS, and even if these models completely flip-flop scenarios, there's still the two main things that could happen with this storm from what I see right now. And again, this scenario right here is obviously a lot better for snow lovers because we've still got a lot of moisture around this low pressure as it's further to the southwest and interacting with that cool air even into Wednesday. That would mean more snow even as far south maybe as Nebraska, Iowa, Kansas, and Missouri. So I don't want anybody to be hyped up about snow yet because it's still more of a 50-50 type of thing. But hey, last video, the big storm was 50-50. Now it looks like it's going to be there, although, some of those impacts like gusty wind, heavy rain aren't necessarily great. But, maybe the snow's going to go from 50-50 to 100% at some point too, so make sure you're staying tuned and subscribing to this channel right here so you stay updated on that. One thing I can tell you for sure, though, is that the temperatures are going to change. I want to discuss these temperature changes that are going to be on the way. First of all, as we close out this week, heading through Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, a lot of the high temperatures are going to remain mild, and they're going to look very similar, so that's why I'm just stopping here on our Friday, November 15th, to show you we're going to have south to north winds over a lot of the country, or at least the general flow looks to be that way. We've got 70s down here towards the Gulf Coast, a lot of mid and upper 60s into the nation's midsection, and it's still near 60 even as you go up there towards Nebraska, Iowa, Illinois, and Indiana. 60 is more typical of October, but we are here in the middle of November by this point, and we should be more like 50 up there towards Des Moines, Iowa, and towards Chicago, as opposed to 55 to 65 in these zones to close out the week. So when is the cool down coming? Well, it's going to come right behind this storm. And regardless of how quickly that cool down catches up initially and possibly brings the chance for snow up there towards the Midwest, it looks like it's going to make it down by around the midweek time frame of next week, at least to the nation's midsection. To show you this change, I'm using the European ensembles here, basically a collection of models averaged out to give you the solution. You can see they're projecting in these yellowish shaded areas from Texas over to the Carolinas, Mid-Atlantic, even some parts of the Ohio Valley. Still mild 50s and 60s into our Wednesday afternoon. But we've got kind of a transition zone of 40s there around the Midwest, and then we could quickly transition over to 20s and 30s, and again, that could include maybe some wraparound snow, depending on which model you look at, back towards the Midwest Wednesday afternoon and in surrounding time frames. By the time we go towards our Thursday, though, we begin to see just dry cold air up there, probably towards the upper Midwest and north central plains, back into the Rockies as well, all those purplish shades indicating teens and 20s. Yet another very brisk morning, and in a lot of places the coolest air of the season into our Friday morning. Look at these numbers. These are very early projections, so don't trust them just yet. But overall, where you see this brightish blue shade sinking as far south as North Texas, northern Louisiana, over to Mississippi, and up through the Appalachians. That is your freezing line Friday morning. According to the solution anyway, the freezing line barely retracts into our Friday afternoon with this kind of cool down, so 10, 15, 20 degree below average temperatures means more like 30s for highs in some parts of the Midwest then, and a very cool weekend would be on the way as we go towards the 23rd and 24th, I can tell you that for sure. Let me go ahead and give you the latest information, just a recap of everything I just discussed in the last 9 minutes here with headlines. First headline is that the pattern is expected to stay quiet as we go through the next 5 to 7 days. If you look back at the models I was just showing you, other than that brief storm with some rain in the eastern half of the country, Wednesday going into our Thursday of this week, nothing big is on the way until we go to around the 18th, or Monday the 18th, when we'll see a storm probably emerge in the south central plains. Then as we go into the 19th and the 20th, the storm will make its way to the northeast. The speed at which that storm makes its way to the northeast is going to impact the chance for snow, because that cool down is coming down either way, and the cool down might lollygag behind the storm if it moves very quickly. And that is going to be something I'm watching for the winter storm potential. But one thing that I'm certainly watching as well are the tropics, because for those of you in Florida, we could have an impactful tropical storm or maybe even hurricane on the way around the same time I'm watching a winter storm up there, possibly in the central U.S. First of all, you can see as we just go through the next several days, by the time we go towards this point in time, this is Saturday morning, the GFS model picking up on a big storm in our red highlighted area from the National Hurricane Center in the west central parts of the Caribbean. We're probably going to have tropical storm or maybe even Hurricane Sarah by this point, south of Jamaica, south of Cuba, but then eventually moving past those zones and possibly threading the needle as a strong, maybe even major hurricane between the eastern tip of Cancun, Mexico there, and the western tip of Cuba around the Havana and Pinar del Rio area. From here, steering looks very uncertain. We could see this storm continue its trajectory due north into the eastern Gulf. We could see it make a turn to the northeast towards places like Miami and Key West there in Florida. We could see this storm completely tilt over to the east and cross Cuba, heading out to sea as a fish storm. That's really going to depend not only on old frontal boundaries lingering around, but also on the steering flow, believe it or not, from that crazy jet stream diving down towards the Gulf Coast as our cool down comes down mid to late next week. This storm is still very uncertain in terms of its trajectory. It could even go west from there. So let's just take a moment and take a breather. Keep an eye out if you're in Florida, but no one needs to panic anywhere along the Gulf Coast just yet. And of course, I'll keep you updated on that storm and everything going on with our central U.S. possible winter storm in my next video, which is likely going to be Thursday. I'll catch you then as I continue to deliver consistent, accurate, and educational updates to you. I hope you'll subscribe so you catch the next one.
One Nation Web.